Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session on Anti-Bribery Management System as per ISO 37001. Next slide, please. Uh, a general housekeeping rules for all the audience. Uh, you will be in the listening mode, and please submit the questions via the question panel in the chat, and we'll have a live QA session at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your cooperation and support. Next slide, please. A brief on the uh, presenter today on the anti-bribery webinar. He is having a primarily 27 plus years of industry experience and conducted more than 3,500 plus hours of auditing in automotive and railway specific industries. He is having qualifications in the sustainability assurance and also on ABMS. He is a trained auditor in ABMS, Mexico and Germany. He is the head of our management system assurance in DQS India. And apart from that, he has got very great portfolios in the Iris. Who we are the, as you know, most of you are knowing, for those of the people who are coming new, DQS is Germany's first certification body for management systems. Next, please. If you see the spread across of global DQS network, we have a global presence of about 65,000 certifications across 130 countries with more than 1,25,000 audit mandates per year. And we have 2,500 qualified auditors and experts in our gambit. We have a global presence and also local expertise. Ours is established in the year 1985 and with the objective of providing impartial, objective, and independent assessments. We have a few shareholders who are, pioneer in the German quality of German Society of Quality, German Institute of Standardization, Underwriter Laboratories, and a few other German, industry federations together form our holding shareholders. Next, please. So we are first in the world to have the accreditation services for 9001 quality management system and 14,001 environment management systems. First certification body to have accreditations, and also we have the first German body to have this. Apart from this, the resources, the qualified auditors we have the who of the who in this auditing. The first in the auditors in India to have ISO TS 16949, Telecom TL 9000, Aerospace AS 9100, ESD 2020, TISAX and ISO 37001, anti-bribery and ISO 20400. So with respect to the pioneering solutions, the only CB to have two certification writing bodies, DIN and UL, as a shareholders, and we have the veto power for ISO 16949 in India. Maximum orders for 2020 and fastest turnover of the certificate release post the closure of the non-conformities and acceptance by the auditors. If you see our DQS rebranding has been done globally as a vibrant, transparent, reliable, and dependable vendor uh, together and the one DQS across the globe. We are implementing digital transformation to support customers to be successful and having real-time information. Basically, we have been rebranded from UL to DQS in the year 2022 across various years. You look at the certifications portfolios, the basket of services what we provide to you. Basically, the legacy products like ISO 9001, 14001, 45001, and also the sustainability. We have a basket of services in sustainability across the anti-bribery 37001 green company certifications, and the sustainability too. We have got carbon footprinting, greenhouse gas emissions, product carbon footprinting, etc. In the IT services and IT related services, We have got 27001 Information Security Management Systems and IT, BCMS, GDPR, PCI, TISAX, and etc. And CA, CMM level 3, level 4, etc. And SOC 1, SOC 2 services, VAPT services, etc. In the other services, what we have, the 40, the aerospace, food safety, medical, and transportation sector. We have a few basket of all these services wherein we will be able to give you solutions across these products. Next, please. If you look at our market leadership in the areas we serve pan India, in the railways we are the first position. We are about 36% of the certifications released in India. In aerospace AS, we are a third position market with a market share of about 12%. In the automotive sector, IATF, we are in market share of 9.5 with the fourth position in the market leadership. And in telecom, we are market leader 1 with a market share of 34%. And ESD, we are market position 1 with a market share of 57%. Next, please. As you know, the world is moving towards the legacy products to the sustainability and anti-corruption. I would request Mr. Girish to be the present for this particular. So, Mr. Girish, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bhaskara, and just a minute. So thank you very much. I hope I'm audible and also visible to all of you. So good evening once again. So when we talk about sustainability, the major three pillars which we classify in terms of environmental, social, and governance. The corruption, we say anti-bribery, anti-corruption, all these aspects comes as a part of good governance practices. If you look at the corruption cases, or if you look at the bribery or corruption, you will find a lot of these things are also related with how those operational controls have been exercised, how those processes are built in the organization to prevent those type of corruption in the organization. So it's basically, in a bigger way, it's a part of the governance. You would have been implementing, you would be implementing the various initiatives under the environment and the social, but there's a very strong pillar under the governance where we call anti-bribery or anti-corruption. This is just to connect you why it is important and where it is related to that. Today, when everybody is talking about how you take care of the environment, or look at from the ESG perspective, not only the financial performance, but also holistically, you have to look the whole organizational performance in terms of environmental, social, and governance side, then the ethical business practices becomes a very important aspect. So the first question is, what is bribery? Now, sometime when we look at the bribery, or actually it used to be a British standard called anti-corruption standard. So when it got released in 2016 as a ISO standard, the name got changed to anti-bribery. But in a bigger context, if you look at it, basically it is a corruption. So how do you prevent? What do you mean by bribery? What do you mean by corruption? Any sort of, when you offer somebody or you promise someone, or else you give, or you accept something, or soliciting of any undue advantage, which is undue advantage, you can understand, which is not due, and then you are favoring somebody of any value, which could be financial or non-financial. So at the end of the session, you will realize that the bribery goes much beyond than what we look at only the financial transaction. And directly or indirectly, or irrespective of location. And therefore, you will find that as a part of this scheme, it is not allowed to go for a certification for only a unit wise. Because there's a possibility that all transactions takes place, all these type of practices are prevalent from the head office level, whereas you want to certify your plant, or you say my plant is doing very ethical practices. That's not allowed it, because irrespective of location, they can be in violation of applicable law. There are various laws applicable in various countries, and so when you why you do this all this thing, inducement or reward for a person, or acting or refraining or acting in relation to the performance. So when it is impacting the performance of a person, which is undue, giving undue advantage to a person, all this gets classified as a part of corruption. As I said, when you look at more of a corruption perspective, then the bribery, probably you'll understand it more better. Bribery is a two-way transaction. Obviously, somebody is giving you, somebody is taking it. So they always so you have to discourage both way. As an organization, you will neither give or nor you will take. So when you see the rule, or when you see the scope of the standard, it talks about two-way transaction or two-way bribery. You need to have a system where you say I have a system which discourages or do not allows to give any bribery. At the same time, we do not take any bribery, or my people or my team doesn't take any bribery. So that's how the whole standard is designed. If you see the various incidents, various corruption cases, you find the building collapses, the bridges collapses, very known thing which you find a lot of time in the news. And when you find those cases and you go in depth of those cases, the causes of those cases, you find basically there's a corruption where somebody paid money to get the contract, and then used inferior material or violated the rules, and because of that, the quality of those buildings and quality of the business are not up to the mark, and that's what they got collapsed. So the statistics says that 80%, 83% of the deaths of building collapse were from the countries which are known to be uh, high corrupt countries. 28% companies globally asked to pay bribe worldwide. This all survey, this data statistics had been taken from the Transparency International, which is a global organization which has their own mechanism to discourage or make a frameworks, or basically bring people on the same platform when it comes to with respect to the corruption or bribery. So there can be various ways how the bribery can be paid. It can be in form of facilitation payment. It can be a gift, or you hospitality, political donations, charitable contributions. You can pay through. You can have agents, and we have a cases where companies are telling that we cut the TDS and then we pay to the agent. So we can't avoid that. In-kind help and support to people, or you give commission, or you sponsor the education and training of somebody in favor of whatever favor you got from him to get done your work. You can pay as an entertainment money to somebody, and then obviously offsetting is something very common, so you offset that much of value. And so these are all possible ways through which the bribery can get paid, or we can say corruption. They are source of correction, the ways how you use these modes as a part of corrupt practices. As an organization, when you say my governance is very clean governance, or operations are very clean, does it mean that you will not do these activity? That's not the intent of the standard. Standard says a certain extent you need to define the system. Obviously, you cannot say that I will give somebody a gift of 1 crore rupees. Obviously, that will be very obvious that that's not. But will you give a diary to somebody or pen to somebody at the beginning of the year as a New Year gift? Whether that will be considered as a bribe, that company has to decide. So that's how the whole system needs to be decided, defined, and the checks and balances have to be made so that it is not misused. Again, when you talk about the strategy, how the briberies are paid and why it was being paid. So the highest number is 37% say that they paid this bribery to get the administrative approval. The second highest was to retain the business, and the third one, influence to people to so they paid this bribe to influence people to get the decision in their favor. And unauthorized use of resources. For that, 10% say they repay that. But still, you can see the administrative approval is still the highest number of people they pay. I think it's very much you can correlate with even India. This is the global data, but India also is very similar to that. When you talk to people, why do they pay, or what are the common excuses? Why do you need to pay that? Uh, we say we have always done it, so without it, the work will not be done. Or we paid the agent, we didn't know that the agent is finally paid to the customer to get our work done. Some cases they say this is the way we have to, otherwise you can't manage these people, you have to pay to them. Others say we can only compete if we pay this much, or if we favor this way, or if we do, maybe you can say a gift, a particular gift or a particular value which is beyond to that, just to compete it, because otherwise we'll not be even considered for the competition. We'll be out from the beginning itself. And some cases there is a system, but just for the namesake and say we didn't know, we thought we have anti-bribery system and that's doing our job, but we didn't know that the people are misusing it or people are still paying the bribery. So there's an organization called Transparency International who publishes the data every year based on the various parameters they have, and they do conduct surveys. And this is the latest corruption perception index they have released. So every year, by the end of January, they release the data for the previous year. And this is this year's data, which has been published on 28th of January or 29th of January. If you see the India, India is having 40 points, and India is at 85th position. So there are total 180 countries in that. If you look at this, this table, you find the higher the number means, means the cleaner the country is. Sorry for this. So Denmark is considered to be cleanest country, similarly followed by Finland and New Zealand, Norway and Singapore. And if you see on the right hand side, you find the South Sudan, Syria, Somalia is considered as a relatively corrupt countries. Again, this is all relative rankings. It was also found that this year when 2022 results came out, certain countries they slipped in the rank because of COVID. So what happens sometimes when you are doing well, when everything is fine, you talk about all this good practices, you talk about the ethics, but the things are situation is tight. Situation is tight, then you start giving it less and less importance. So it was felt that because of COVID, there are many countries which slipped actually. So if you want to go through this detail, there's a detailed report available on Transparency International website. You can go through that and understand it. If you look at the India perspective, if you see the scores which India has got from 2013 to 2022, last 3 years we are stagnant. So last 3 years we have a score of 40 and same level. Before that, for a very short, say for 2 years, we were 41, but more or less, if you see, we are almost at a 38, so 41 or 40. So not much change in the last, say even from say 2014, not much changes in this time, in the ranking. So there has been change from, if you see, before 2014 and there were also only 36, but there were initially some changes, improvement because of the government brought in those online bidding, online tendering, which has certain level improve the ranking, but not to a greater extent. You may be wondering what are the other factors gets considered, even as much as we talk about the freedom of press, freedom of expression. We talk about how the voice of the people are suppressed. All those things gets considered when we look at when they look at the corruption. So it's not only the monetary thing, but so many other factors which gets considered when they say the corruption perception index, or when they talk about the corruption, because it has two part of it. As I said, the operational control, and it's a part of financial control. Operation control wise, those indicators shows that operationally we are suppressing people, we are not giving freedom, human right violation. All those things are cases which you find in the country. Recent cases, there are a lot of hue and cry, but Adani, nothing has come out, but that has impacted the image of the country, and that also impacts the CPI. So every year, some other scam takes place, and that also gets considered when you consider the CPI. So if you want to understand more about it, there is a methodology defined there. The factor which are being considered, that is defined there. You can go through that. The third is it was found that from sector to sector, there are certain sectors which are more prone for bribery or corruption. There are certain sectors which are less prone for corruption. So the agriculture is relatively less prone for corruption. Whereas if you see the PwC, when you find the utilities fund, or you say real estate, or property, legal and business services, oil and gas, mining, the power generation and transportation. So these are the areas where you also would know that. In India also, it's a global data, but India also is almost very similar to that. So the mining, the oil and gas, the PwC, the PWD, the power generation, they are considered the high possibility of corruption areas. Now, how does this impact to say when the standard was developed? So these factors are considered because when a company falls in this particular sector, which are high risk sectors, then obviously the effort required to assess the company, to audit the company, gets increased. When a company is falling in a sector which is either a moderate risk sector or it's a low risk sector, then the effort required. So the one is the sector, second is the country. Which country your company is located? If your country is located in India, which is having CPI of 40, then there's the moderate risk is there. With the moderate risk, certain days of audit is required. If the country is falling less than 30 CPI, and it's a high risk area, high risk country, a different number of days are required. So this has a significance in terms of the sector which you operate, the country which your company is located. It has an impact in terms of how in depth the evaluation is done in terms of your systems compliance to the bribery system. So initially, when this so there are various standards. For example, we all know the risk management standard. So ISO 31000, that's a guidance standard or reference standard. Similarly, there was a talk that this will also be a guidance standard, but they wanted to make it the certifiable standard. So finally, it was agreed by the ISO to release it as a certifiable standard. So this is accredited standard, not like ISO 31000 risk management, and it needs accreditation for a company, for a certification body to do the audit for this. So what is the standard all about? This covers various aspects of it, which we just talked about. Not every aspect, but yes, definitely certain aspects are covered. So established in October 2016, it was published, and the purpose was that companies can implement and they can maintain and they can improve as a anti-bribery compliance program. It includes a series of measures and controls that global anti-bribery, which has been taken from the global anti-bribery risk practices. I remember that the discussion was on when first time we were discussing about this in Mexico, that people are telling, does it mean that a company is certified or company has implemented a anti-bribery compliance program that there would be no bribery cases? So it is very similar, like if you have ISO 9001, does it mean that there will be no rejection or there will be no customer complaint? It only means that you have a system in place which is there to prevent production of those non-conforming product. However, if you find a non-conforming product internally, or if it goes to the customer and customer sends you back as a customer return or lodges a customer complaint, you have a mechanism how to analyze it and how to prevent it for the future. And so very similar approach in this anti-bribery standard also. You have to implement a system, you have to maintain it, And if any such cases are found, then you have to appropriately take action and improve your controls on the program. So it does not mean there will be no cases, but definitely it will take time to improve the system to discourage the bribery cases or discourage the favorism in the company, and also it will improve slowly the compliance with the anti-bribery program. So it needs to have a series of controls which has taken from the good practices. So as we were talking about, the controls are in terms of operational controls, in terms of financial controls, which deters or which prevents such similar cases. The second question comes, do we need to have a separate system? We need to have a separate manual procedures for this. It is not required because your company processes remains the same. So you have just for example, you have a sales and marketing process. Every company would have that, a contracting process or tendering process, whatever you call this, a process which interfaces with the customer. Then you will have the product realization process. If you're into manufacturing, there will be manufacturing process. If you're servicing, to service realization process. And then there'll be purchasing process, which is procuring the services or products. There will be HR process who are recruiting resources who can work on those processes. Everything is there. Now, so when you do the ISO 9001 or energy or say EHS when you implement, what do you look at it? The ISO 9001, you look at the system with respect to the processes with respect to achieving those in QMS, you look at whether those objectives of those organization, how it will be achieved. What is the risk they did not be achieved? Similarly, when you look at the environment perspective, you look at it, the environmental risk. When you look at the health and safety, you look at the health and safety risk. But the approach remains the same. So similarly, when you look at the bribery perspective, each process you have to look corruption perspective. You have to look at it from the corruption perspective, each of those processes. And those processes needs to be based on those risks. You have to build in those additional controls and implement it. So you don't need a separate system, or the existing system has to have additional controls to prevent it from the corruption perspective. So that's how in short the meaning is. And similarly, the high level structure which is being followed for ISO 9001 or 1445 or 50, today all the standards are following the same high level structure because that was the intent when this high level structure was brought in 2015. So you can integrate all the standards, and also you can integrate the ABMS to all the standards. There are cases that people say that a small organization or middle scale of organization or large scale of organization or government sector. I remember the Coal India, they wanted to implement it. So as a government organization, and we are just seeing that it's a high risk area, with respect to bribery. So the organization could be NGO, could be non-governmental, private, small or medium-sized, large organization. Everywhere it is possible. Now, what is different in those cases is obviously a small organization. I have also audited and certified a company which is having only 5 people, and it was not 5, I think it was 9 people. So a very highly automated company into cryptocurrency. They were into cryptocurrency business, and as you know, cryptocurrency, particularly they work on a blockchain, and then everything is high tech, high end. There were only 9 people. So if it is a small organization, the process will be limited and the controls also will be limited. If it is a multi-site, big organization, multi-products, obviously the risk assessment from all perspectives you have to consider. So obviously the number of processes will be more, the risk possibilities will be more. The more risk will be there, the more control you need to build in. So the process becomes more and more complex, and then obviously you have more people to manage those processes. So it is the broad perspective, remains the same for all. However, when you look at the micro level implementation, it will vary from small organization to medium scale organization to the large organization. So what is the addresses? The second question came. So it addresses as I said, the bribery by the organization or its person. So as a system implementation, you will ensure that through your process, by controlling your processes, that you're not paying, or your people are not paying bribery to anybody. And similarly, your team is not associated for accepting any bribery. So both aspects are covered as a part of this bribery management system. Does standard define the bribery? No, because bribery is defined by the law. Every country has a different laws for handling bribery. We have done audit in various countries, and when we look at those countries, additionally we also look at what does that country bribery law says, and then accordingly how those laws has been cascaded to the company, and while deciding the processes, how those thresholds have been defined. Say, for example, Austria, they have also defined even the values that the gift, say, we discussed that the gift is a one part of could be one part of the bribery, where you say somebody has been given a huge amount of money as a gift to get a favor from him. So even the Austria law defines that bribery up to this value only can be given. So that depends upon the country to country, what type of laws they have defined. If a company is operating in that country, then they have to abide to that. Those laws and the process controls have to built in, considering those as an input. Okay, so this is one thing, and then second is uh, what is the purpose? What is this whole system? We say anti-bribery management system. The system is to develop a culture in the company where, and through the various appropriate controls, so that first of all, you're preventing chances of bribery. Second is, in case there is a chance, you will detect it. In case some such thing happens, your system should be able to detect it and finally take the action so that it can be prevented for in the future. And it can cover all type of organization, private or government sector, profit or non-profit organization. Uh, it is applicable for everyone. What is standard? Now, people say, okay, I want to implement this ABMS. One is standard, but broadly tell us what are the things, or what are the requirements of the standard. So, bribery is not something which, or corruption is not something which can be done by operator level person without a consent of senior management. Nobody will give the gift from the pocket. Nobody will sponsor the training of a business partner from the pocket. And when you give on behalf of company, then obviously the senior management is involved. So the first and foremost, every standard today, if you talk about right from the ISO 9001 till any sector specific standard, it says that management commitment. But here, the commitment requirement is much more than any other standard because of the money is involved. So the anti-bribery policy has to be in place, which should be defined by management. The management leadership, commitment, and responsibility. It says the commitment and policy should be from the board of director level. So one step ahead, it talks about. If company do not have a uh, board of director thing, then whatever senior most person is there, CEO or MD, he can he can he can drive this, but it has to come from the whole system is answerable to the board of directors. It talks about the personal controls and training. When you talk about the cultural changes, obviously cultural changes, the people are the most important ingredient or most important part of any culture changes. Machines culture you can't change. So people, how they are slowly injected or slowly brought in the change in mindset, change in it's a culture changes, so that they start thinking that this is right or this is wrong. So one is through training and retraining, you'll find a lot of requirement in terms of right from the time a person joins the company, and then keep him reminding by this refresher training, and then certain controls. You ensure that he's ready now to follow your system, which is to prevent, detect, and to improve in terms of corruption. The risk assessment. So each process you have to do risk assessment uh, with respect to bribery or corruption. So what is the possibility that there would be corruption? Let's, for example, look at any process. You look at HR process. What is the process? What is the possibility? What is the corruption? A person who is not deserving candidate, it can be selected. Now, what are the possible? How do you deter it? How do you stop it? Whatever controls you have. Similarly, a supplier which is the which is not deserving, or maybe based on the price, based on the quality, or based on the infrastructure, whatever your criteria are there, and he gets approved, whereas other people are not getting approved. Recently, you saw that the newspaper, the Maruti case has come. So, what is your control that a supplier is charging more money and then still he gets the order? Other supplier, the market price of that is lesser than they are not getting the order why he's getting. So, what is your controls on your that process, procurement process, supplier approval process, or price fixation process, with respect to the bribery, with respect to the corruption? You have to look at it as a part of risk assessment. You may so risk assessment is more of a proactive activity, as you know that it's a ever since it has come, the corrective preventive action or the preventive action has been moved because risk assessment has been considered as a more of a preventive approach. Now, then what is the detective approach? You may you may find a situation uh, where there are two situations. One is proactively, you know that this particular position or this particular project is very sensitive. There are chances of bribery, or this particular procurement is very sensitive. Or if you are putting up a plant and the plant and machinery are to be procured. You are putting a new product line where the supplier has to be approved a different type of. Suppose you are moving from a typical product to the e-vehicles now. All supply chain will be different. Anything. So you have a chances of bribery cases, or you may also find that there are projects which are sensitive. There are positions which are sensitive. How do you do the due diligence on those projects and associates so that any chances of uh, bribery or corruption can be identified? So it can be done both ways. Proactive due diligence, uh, before say if a person, you can do proactive before he joins, you can do due diligence, but for the projects you have to do afterwards only. You may do risk assessment at the beginning, but due diligence is mainly a post activity, more of a looking at a control to detect it, whether any wrong practices have been followed in the project. That's called due diligence. So due diligence, so risk management and due diligence goes hand by hand. But obviously, the risk management also, you look at it, the low risk area, you will not take action immediately because it's a very low risk. And similarly, due diligence also, you may not do due diligence for everything, but you know that this is for the critical project, a critical business associate, or the critical employees who are joining the various critical positions. You may like to do due diligence. Now, when you say due diligence, what way? With respect to bribery. Again, the whole subject revolves around the corruption. Financial, commercial, and contractual controls. Any of the cases which you find in the market or allegations, I would not use that because the charge are being made. Sometimes you don't know those are correct or not correct. Any scam, you take it, and then you find that uh, there were operational controls available, but some of those are violated. That's the basic thing you will find. So there are financial control that in each company, and we'll talk about in subsequent slide, and there will be operational control. And when the investigation took place, you realize that those operational controls were violated. So just assume if those operation controls are in place, then those chances would have been reduced for that. And therefore, the company has to have the operational control and the financial control, and keep on reviewing those, whether those are appropriate, those are sufficient to deter, to avoid the corruption case. There need to be reporting, monitoring, investigation, review mechanism. Now, as you say, the culture changes, and as you find that it talks about favoring somebody, whether it's supplier or it's customer or it's your own employee, promotion is given, incentive is given, there are chance of favorism. How it comes on the surface. So there has to be there has to be a mechanism where people can put a red flag or raise alarm, whatever mechanism you call it by name. And if it is reported, then it has to be investigated, monitored, and appropriate actions are taken. Again, I was auditing one of the company, and they said there was incidents when uh, there was somebody had raised a alarm, a complaint that a particular purchase manager he is also having a stake, his own company with a partnership with somebody, and where the product, the child part is coming. It was investigated by a team of people because again, it's a company's process how you define the which team will work on investigation on this. And the investigation was done, but because that position person was very influential, that no action was taken. So that's again a failure of the system. You need to report, you need to monitor, you need to investigate, and also you need to take action so that it gives the right message to the people. Corrective action and continuous improvement. Obviously, when you find such cases, you need to analyze that and take appropriate action. So that's a part of corrective action. So these are the things comes as a part of this ABMS, Anti-Bribery Management System. You need to have policy, management commitment, personal and control and training, the bribery risk assessment, how do you do due diligence on the projects and business associates, what type of financial, commercial, and contractual controls you have in your company, considering those risk assessment outputs, controls, and how the alarms are raised. If it is raised, how it is monitored, investigated, reviewed, corrective actions are taken, and the whole system gets improved as a part of this PDC exercise. So, in nutshell, these are the main thing. There are various other things. We'll talk about some of them in the later slides, but this is a gist of overall ABMS we talk about. So this is the more of a so if you look at ABMS per se, the whole system is to help organization to prevent the corruption cases, bribery cases. In case your system is not able to prevent because maybe the controls are not adequate, then you should be able to detect it. What is the mechanism? By the due diligences, by the raising alarm mechanism, all those whistleblower policy, and all those things. There are different mechanisms are available which which companies they adopt, and followed by responding to that in terms of corrective action and preventive action, not preventive action, corrective action, analysis, and taking appropriate action to prevent such situation in future. The whole so 37,000 also works on a high level structure, same way PDCA. Starting from clause number 4, we talk about the context of the organization. The only difference here is you have to understand the context of the organization with respect to corruption, which industry sector it falls. Now, as we discussed earlier, there are certain industry sector where the corruption is high, certain sector where corruption is less. Understanding the expectation of the various stakeholders on that. Obviously, government is the biggest stakeholder in that. Other stakeholders, what do they expect in terms of fair business practices? And then you need to have the scope of ABMS, and then you need to have processes defined for ABMS, where you have to look at process from the corruption perspective. Then you have to do bribery risk assessment. The leadership talks about the bribery, the policy talks about the roles and responsibilities should be defined clearly so that people are adequately powered, but they also need to have checks and balances so that somebody is not misusing the power. So here it comes, the roles and responsibilities becomes very clear. And then how do you implement those actions which are being defined as a part of risk management, by risk management, by integrating in the respective processes so that people can follow those processes, and in the process indirectly they works as a deterrent of the corruption in the company. You need resources, you need competence of people, you need awareness and training of this, you need to communicate people that this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. Many times it was found, people say, I was not aware of that. This is the first point is, how many people know that if somebody is favoring you, he is looking something in return of that. It could be information, as simple as that. It could be information, it could be competitor information, it could be product which your company is buying from outside, where he want to evaluate which product he can bid for that. So it can be as simple as that. So how does whether people are aware of that these things are not allowed, or these things are the part of code of people normally document as a part of code of ethics, not acceptable or not allowed, because many times casually they handle casually and they find that they get caught, poor fellows. So that's a part of training, awareness training, and how to discourage it, what type of things, do's and don'ts, what type of cases can get classified, and how to respond to that. Most importantly, if somebody pays you, somebody offers you something, then how do you respond to those situations? The employee should know from that perspective also. Then you have operational control, the due diligence, financial controls is a part of do, non-financial controls. Uh, then you have a bribery commitments. How do you handle the gift hospitality and the similar benefits? How you also manage the anti-bribery controls, inadequacies. What is your raising alarm means whistleblower policy or similar system. It doesn't talk about whistleblower policy, but similar system where people are free to raise the alarm if they find such suspicious cases, and then how to deal with that. And finally, it talks about how do you monitor it. And like any other standard, the internal audit management review becomes a part of the standard. Here, the only thing is you are looking again internal audit with respect to bribery, and also the management review with respect to adequacy of the system getting implemented. So there are certain bribery. What are the bribery laws and bribery in the laws? Uh, if you look at in 1996, if you look at the history, that the international law has been put in place to fight the bribery by OECD, and similarly in UNCAC convention, 140 countries participated. They accepted in principle that the bribe is something which is not correct, and in their country uh, they will bring controls to discourage it. And based on that, you'll find uh, various countries they have come out their own anti-bribery laws. If you look at various countries, they have a different corruption law. India has a India Corruption of Prevention Act 1988, and there are other different country has different. So whichever country the company is located, the first thing is you have to look at that law in that country and then see how it is implemented, know to the people, and all that. So there are other anti-corruption legislations in India. For example, right to information. Uh, I talked to prevention of corruption. This has been amended in 2018. Then prevention of money laundering act, whistleblower protection act, Loka Act 2013. So these are the things indirectly, directly they talk about. They talk about the corruption. So you need to go through them before you implement the system in your company, so that depending upon nature of business, how the requirement whether they are applicable to your company or not, you have to look at that. We talked about the organization which are high risk. For example, just for the understanding, probably it will not impact to the implementation wise. Only the controls has to be of different level. Public administration or financial entities, they are high risk. Pharmaceutical, healthcare, construction companies. That is why you find uh, every scam or some other way the banks are getting involved. Their name comes up, pops up. What way they're involved, we don't know. But because money is involved, so the financial institutes they come in a high risk category. And other they are we talked about the agriculture business, the medium skill industries, the mechanical, those are machinist industries, they comes as a part of the medium scale. Every standard, when you look at it, I think it's very important. See, you will find that you got a standard, and then uh, you have to implement the standard requirement. A lot goes behind the standard in terms of the principles which are kept in mind when the standard was designed. I think it's important that when you understand these principles, then it becomes important to implement that standard. So there are 6 principles which are important or fundamental, understanding the fundamentals of the ABMS, which are critical. First is the proportionate procedures. People say, what extent of documentation is required? Now, there's no answer for that. How in detail the bribery risk assessment is done? Again, there's no question, no answer for that. So every company, they based on the team's understanding and knowledge, you decide the controls. Obviously, the controls should not be so suffocating that you cannot work. So you define the controls to an extent where the process can run, and uh, and then you review those controls. If you find those controls are adequate, move on. You find certain controls based on the incident which you find, based on the feedback of the people, based on the alarm people raise, idea they share. You want to increase control of certain areas, you can do that. Top management commitment, as we discussed about, is the most vital here, because it is not possible to get involved in any of these activities without the involvement and support of the top management. So if they say that, yes, we want to implement a system, we discourage it, then only it is possible to implement, otherwise it will be only eyewash. Risk assessment is very, very important element, because if you do not do the right risk assessment, it is like if you don't have a proper risk assessment in any system, whether it's ISO 9001 or it's any other standard you talk about, because you will not identify the risk, then you will not identify, you don't have to identify the controls, and then that becomes only a superficial system. So what extent you have to do that, again, depends upon the type of industry you are into, and type of controls you want to have. These are all of the issues which you have had in the past. Due diligence is very important. So when the people join the company in a critical position, due diligence on the sales and marketing side, if you have a dealers, then whatever due diligence you have done on them, they are not involved. You have agents, what is the control you have on them? If you have suppliers, and what are controls you have on them? The due diligence are critical on a project which are beyond a certain value, uh, project which are in certain sensitive sectors, your customers are located, or customers are from those sensitive sectors. So based on that, you need to define the whole system. Which are the cases you will do due diligence? What are the things you will verify in due diligence? Who will do the due diligence? And how the result of the due diligence will be utilized? Communication is an important part, as we talked about. It's more of a cultural change. So people need to be communicated about the standard, about what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is how do you identify how do they identify the bribery or corruption cases? Because if they do not realize that this is wrong, then they will not be able to raise the alarm also. When you where you have a provision where people can the whistleblower as a part of whistleblower policy or raising alarm policy, they can inform the team that something is wrong here. Even in case of doubts, also they can inform. But if they do not know that this is not acceptable, then they will not. They will also not inform, because for them this is nothing wrong has gone. And monitor and review whatever cases are logged, whatever information has been logged as a I would say through the due diligence, through the due diligence, and through the raising alarm cases or whistleblower policy, how those cases are handled, monitored, reviewed, acted upon. So these six principles are very important. And if any of these principles are not followed in the right spirit, that will seriously impact the effectiveness of the ABMS. Certain areas which we talked about, I think we thought let's throw a little bit more light on that. Risk assessment we have all seen in other standards. How this is different. So some countries they say that transaction of a they say transaction beyond a certain value is considered as a high risk transaction, or whatever, if your agents or intermediaries we are involved, so transaction through them is a high risk area. Suppliers who are supplying goods for a say beyond a certain value, then you say these are treated as a medium risk or high risk area, depending upon the threshold limit what you decide. So these are the things you have to decide as a part of your risk assessment. and accordingly, then you'll build a control. Obviously, a high level of risk requires a high level of controls. The second concept, which is here, delegated decision making. Whenever you're delegating the decision authorities to somebody, there has to be very clear metrics that up to what level, who is allowed to or who is authorized to approve. Most of these practices you will find in the company. And the reason behind this is that this is also a standard requirement, but as a part of controls in the company, see, somebody is not certified waving, it does not mean that he will not have a financial control or operational control. You may not have a formal certification or formal implementation of the standard. So you'll find typically that authorities are defined in each company for a certain level of people, for a certain level of. So there's a metrics. You'll find cases where you say up to this much amount is authorized, up to this much amount the plant head is authorized, up to this much amount approval, the corporate approval has to be required. We even find many cases the customer says that our authority is up to 5 lakh rupees, your quote is less than 5 lakh rupees, then we don't have to ask. Otherwise, you have to go and ask the corporate for the approval. So it is there in the companies, but I think when you're implementing a system, there's a chance to revisit that and you say that whether this is adequate in terms of avoiding any risk, particularly the bribery risk. The competence is important part of this ABMS. So you need to have, first of all, train people, and you need to have access of policy to people. In case of any violation, what type of action you will take, people should be aware of that. And you also need to have policy, people should be aware of that somebody as a whistleblower, because he might have found something fishy and he raises the alarm. He will not face any retaliation or discrimination. As a part of competence and recruitment, you need to have also due diligence on people before they are employed or before they are transferred or before they are promoted, for people who are holding a critical position. So it is not for everybody. It is not that you are hiring a GET and then you are doing due diligence for his background. You can still do that if your company has a policy. But what standard says as a minimum that when you're hiring people on the critical positions who are taking decisions, then you need to do due diligence on in terms of corruption, whether in his previous company or his previous role, whether what type of his credentials are, what type of his feedback is from the people. Typically, people know that there will be perception about a person. So in terms of bribery, in terms of corruption, what is his background? So the people have to be. So we have seen cases where agencies are hired, where people, those agencies are supposed to perform the due diligence of the background of the person in terms of. See, when you say background check, it could be a various areas. It could be the authenticity of those education, the work experience which he is showing, and also that with respect to any other feedback which you want to have. The standard does expect that with respect to corruption also to take a feedback. Performance bonuses, targets, and other what you're giving. So whether somebody is doing an undue favor to somebody while giving those bonuses and performance targets. So what is the internal mechanism? How it is done? How do you ensure that there is no favorism in that? And that's something. It goes beyond the bribery. It's more of a giving favor. If you go back to the original definition of the anti-bribery when we talked about it, the undue favor. So you're doing somebody undue favor. You don't know. Maybe you are getting a cut out of the bonus or cut out of the incentive. So to discourage that, what is your performance appraisal process? How you give those bonuses? Remuneration periodically is reviewed. So what is the mechanism which discourages this? So this covers as a part of this. Then due diligence is a very important part of it. We saw one of the 6 basic principles which is behind this. And how do you do diligence when you enter with the say business associate? So you are hiring agent, or you are approving a supplier, or so it goes beyond the person. So in the previous slide we talked about a person. When a person joined the company, then what type of due diligence you do in terms of his background check. Here, due diligence, so that's a part of personal. Due diligence can also be done on the projects. Due diligence can also be done on a certain supplier. Due diligence can also be done on the whole, say last year, you say, this is the last year, and then suppliers who have supplied the material beyond this threshold limit, they need to be later on, they need to be scrutinized in terms of whether all the processes were followed in those cases. So you need to have due diligence, a very strong system to make sure that whatever risk assessments are done, those are adequate in spite of those, whether any other cases have uh, missed by the company, or so that's part of the due diligence process. So the due diligence process, the purpose is to learn more about the relevant business associate and the possible bribery risk it may pose to the organization. So you have to, so whatever business associates are there, with the agents, or supplier, or your customer, your own employees, uh, uh, you have to look at, then you have to define the criteria. Obviously, you cannot do due diligence for everyone. So projects which are beyond the threshold limit, suppliers supplying beyond this, suppliers are getting repeated business, agents which are doing exceptional business, whether any chances of violation of those commercial financial control and the operational controls have taken place. That's the meaning of due diligence. We talked about this on person. I think that we'll move on this. Now we'll talk about the financial controls and operational controls. Now every company, when we go without looking at the AVMS, we find those controls are there. Checks and balances are there. For example, cash controls. So companies, most of the companies, they have very tight limit on cash control, just petty cash cases. Otherwise, now these days, cash companies do not pay. They have a system that cash payment will not be given beyond a certain value. No off the book accounts, no offshore payments, control of assets. So how do you identify various assets and how do you dispose them off? Because that's a very simple way of favor somebody. Uh, you would have seen all those cases. The land has been given to somebody at a throwaway price. What is your control on those assets? Accurate books and accounts. So we also look at the when we do audit, we also look at those the financial audit reports. We also look at so because every company is supposed to have the financial auditor, and he reports he gives a report to you. So what type of, and there you will find typical the violation. They also do audit. So now what type of those accurate controls, why those issues have come up, that also gives you input for your AVMS audit. So the accurate books and accounts, the third party, how those are being engaged, any new technology, how do you monitor the financial controls? So this is all a part of financial control, which basically works as a deterrent. So when you find a simple case of checks which is being signed by 2%, not by 1%, when you find that the completion of work is approved by somebody else, then the guy who initiated the payment has to be a different person. That is all part of controls. So today, if you go back and review your company processes, you will find at least 50, 60%, or maybe 70, 80%. These controls will already be there. That is basically to control that uh, unless you want to influence everybody, to, then nobody can stop you. But if one person cannot take a one-sided decision to favor somebody, to discourage that, those type of controls are there, where you say completion of work should be done by somebody else, the approval supply should be done by somebody, order should be given by somebody. So these are all part of control built in to avoid the corruption cases or favor to somebody. So we talked about this. So your control in terms of pre-qualification. So when you say non-financial controls or operational control, that's why you find that the purchase team can only give an order to the approved supplier. The suppliers are approved by a qualification process by a different team. Many companies will find the corporate approves the supplier, or strategic supply chain approves the supplier, and the plan just pays the order. The corporate also fix the pricing and everything. So the agency who fix the pricing, agency who uses them are the different things. So that there are less chances of favoring. You can still do a favor. Now those favor possibilities again can come out as a part of risk assessment, and you can have again a control on that. So there would be multiple possibilities that you have to put it as a part of risk management, and then as a team, you have to come out with a control also. Awarding contracts where possible reasonable, only fair. So even today, you find the tendering process as a part of it where everything is known to it. So e-tendering data, there are people are still find out a way how you can influence that, but at least it is a relatively fair process than the closed envelope process used to have earlier, requiring at least 2% to evaluate the tenders and approves award of a contract. That's another way of doing it as a part of non-financial controls. The other thing is, you may say that I'm not involved in corruption cases. I discourage it. My company is very ethical. But uh, what happens that you have your business associates who are involved in that? So what is your mechanism? Whatever your reasonable controls on you have, that your business associate also are uh, following the similar type of uh, I won't say processes, but they have a similar outlook in terms of discouraging the bribery and bribery process. So as you see the other standard, when you talk about the supplier should also be certified, ISO certified, a very similar thing it is talking about. Because what happens is that uh, bribery is very dicey case. As I said, company has 12 plants, 20 plants, and their one head office which is not covered in any other standard. And typically you find the management is there and everything takes place from there only, which is out of purview. So this standard does not allow that. It says every plant, every office has to be covered, number one. Similarly, for the supply chain, you need to have, so you have to, the business associate which are business associate, typically your distributor, your agents, your dealers, you have to also implement certain level the understanding, the knowledge, and ethics, so that they also do not get involved. So how do you do this? That is why you today, if you enter into business with any customer, they will ask you to sign the anti-bribery policy. They will also assign you a code of ethics. What is that? Now try to understand. It is an extension of this where the standard says not only you will do, but also you will ensure that your supply chain doesn't do that. And as a part of this only, at a minimum, what do you do? At the minimum, you frame a code of ethics, you frame a anti-bribery policy and ask them to sign, where it is mentioned that they will not get involved in any such activities. That's a standard requirement. Gift hospitality and benefit. The standard says obviously we talked about the gift and hospitality and the various type of uh, ways through which the favor can be given to somebody and your advantage can be given to somebody. But you have to define a policy that up to what level it is allowed, what way it is allowed. If somebody gets, so somebody have to give beyond this, how it will be given, who will approve it, where it will be recorded, how it will be reviewed. So that whole mechanism you have to define it. It does not say don't give gift to anybody. Obviously, you can't define that gift can be given up to 100 crores or 1,000 crores. Obviously, it will not pass in the first look at the standard itself. But you have to define what is reasonable, which is not conceived, which is not. If you give a pen to somebody, a diary to somebody, obviously is not going to give business just because you're giving a diary to him. So those type of things, limits have been defined. I was talking about some countries. So I've seen Austrian law of anti-bribery. There, even the values have been defined by the government. That gift up to this value is okay. I've not seen any other country. A couple of countries I've seen from this perspective of policy, but that's the only case I've seen. There could be possible other country also, but at least I'm not aware of. Managing adequacy of control. So you will find consequences in cases where it is things are not right. Then how will you take control? How will you take action as a part of this? Raising alarm. That's a very important aspect. See, it is not possible that people would not know. It is possible management would not know. It is like what your kid is doing. Sometimes you do not know, but your kid's friends will know everything. Your other people will know. See, you may not know the father about the kid. Same thing. If you're favoring somebody, if some supplier is getting a more price for something, or is getting repeated order because of favor by somebody, other supplier would definitely know. Or somebody who's losing that, he would know that. The only thing they do not know the mechanism, how to pass on this information so that their interest is not impacted because they are also part of most of the time a part of it. For example, that is why initially we talked about the employee when they say you will raise the alarm, you raise the concern, there should not be retaliation. So you need to have a culture where they not face any consequences of or retaliation of raising the concern. So what is your mechanism for that, and how whether people are aware of that how to raise the alarm, how to give this information, maybe anonymous information or some ballot boxes, some email IDs, some phone numbers where some people can pass on those information, and and then system that they will not be victimized, and then top management has to promote this type of culture in the company. There's a guideline standard 37002. It's very detailed. It talks about the whistleblowing management system. It is not It is not mandatory to implement this standard, but it is highly recommended that you go through this standard while designing your whistleblower policy in the company. So it's a beautiful standard. You can go through that, and then that will help you to identify various aspects of it. Performance evaluation, obviously, like any other standard, the how effectively it has been implemented, you need to have monitoring and measurement defined for those processes. Internal audit, you need to have mechanisms in place so that you can check with the people are following those processes, those controls, and getting benefit of that. Management review has to be a part of it. And the standard also says that you need to have an anti-bribery compliance function. So other standard that MR role has been now removed sort of. It says top management is responsible, and if you assign somebody take care of that, that's a different issue. But here it's a mandatory to have a management as a anti-bribery compliance function, and there has to be a person who is responsible for this function. So more or less is the MR for ABM, as you can call it, is a mandatory requirement here, and he reports to the management about the performance of it and all those things. So it has come back in a way in this particular standard, and he reports to the board of directors. So that's all from our side. DQS has been pioneer in the ABMS. As I said, this is an accredited program, and I still to find any CB in India who is accredited and having accredited qualifications for the auditor in India. So there are CBs who bring auditors from overseas for accredited program. Again, I'm coming back to accredited one. So there are many people who say I can do ABMS, but please confirm whether they have accreditation, and accreditation is from an accredited agency. So that's the one thing. You need any further information on this in terms of very specific training on this topic with respect to your organization, or you have already in place various controls? As I said, typically companies will have a financial controls and operational controls, and you say how much ready you are. We can do a gap assessment or readiness, and we can give you these are the areas you need to further improve to be 100% compliant to this. And we can also do for certification. So that's how our portfolio is. We have a local auditor in India, so you don't have to bear the travel cost and other thing for auditor bringing from overseas. And the other advantage is the auditor is in India and he has a audited. So our auditor goes to overseas for doing audit. So he has an international experience, but locally available. So that's and the advantage you will have if you work with DQS in terms of ABMS. So thank you very much for this patient hearing. We are almost up now. We have 10 minutes time for any queries or any questions if you have if you put in the chat box. So Mahantesh,
Yes,
is there anything? Yeah.
yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. Before going to the question, I would request all if you have any question and clarification, please write down under the chat box. We will address your questions. So the first question I have is accounts department need to be a part of ABMS?
Yes, I've been listening. I've been in audit for the last 20 years, more than 20 years rather. People always used to say the accounts and finance department, whether they are not under purview of ISO or IATF or IRIS, for which I do audit. This is a area where the accounts department is mandatorily in the purview of that. When we look at the financial controls, we audit the finance function. And not only that, we also look at the financial audit reports and other things. Because see, there are two ways of it. One is you do an audit, finance audit, and but then you need enough time for that. So other way, you look at the output of the finance audit. So we look at the third party because every company is mandated to have an independent auditor who does audit of a company. So we look at those financial audit reports and we look at through that how these controls have been finalized. And we also look what are the samples we take from the various processes. We look at from the financial control perspective with the finance team. So in short, answer is yes, the accounts department it gets audited.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the next question is it mandatory to prepare various policies like anti-bribery, gift and hospitality, intellectual property, or all these things may comes under policy like FBP?
See, any standard when you implement, we never say that you need to have a separate policy or separate procedure or separate risk assessment or separate due diligence. What you have to do you have to look at from the perspective of corruption, and you can integrate it. So if you have already a policy of quality, health and safety, or even energy management, and you want to add another point here with respect to bribery, we are okay for that, because when we come for ABMS audit, we see whether management commitment, what is the management commitment and policy with respect to the anti-bribery. But we have seen both type of cases where companies say, sir, it is very difficult to integrate, it become very complex. Can I do separate one? Say, boss, it is your purview. So if you can integrate it, absolutely fine. We are okay for that from auditor perspective. From the user perspective, you have to see how will you implement it, whether it is user friendly. Because when you make a system, it has to be compact, but it has to be user friendly also. For example, risk assessment. When you do process assessment, if you look at it from the bribery perspective and you want to integrate it, we are very fine for that. So there's nothing where I would say that other than now again coming back to say internal audit. When you say can I do internal audit along with the other audits, obviously you have to do that. Only thing is you have to make sure that auditor who goes he may be qualified for 9,000, or auditor who goes for this integrated audit, he should also be qualified for ABMS as a auditor, as an internal auditor. So any integrated thing when you do, or the team who does risk assessment, the risk assessment team should be right people who also understand the corruption perspective, who know the financial control, non-financial control. Then you can do together also. So I hope I will to answer you. We don't look at separate or integrated system. It is your purview as an organization. We only come and see whether the requirement from the ABMS perspective is addressed or not addressed, understood or not understood, implemented or not implemented. That's it.
Okay, thank you, sir. So next question is what all criteria are to be considered for bribery risk assessment, and up to what level it needs to be carried out?
See, it is very similar like when you look at any risk assessment. That is why standard says you follow the risk assessment, which is process which is defined by ISO 31000. Now, what are the corruption cases possible now for each process? So when you say bribery risk with respect to say procurement of the item, bribery risk with respect to selling of the item, bribery risk with respect to recruitment of the people, or corruption cases with respect to recruitment of the people. Only thing risk you have to look at from that perspective. Now, what level you want to see, how much detail you want to have, for that only I had mentioned there has to be proportionate procedure. So we do not expect that you need to have very high level of control where the organization is falling in the low risk category or medium risk category. Process are simple, then you may not require. So standard says that you start with a moderate level, and then if you feel that that is not adequate the control, then you enhance those controls. If you find it is like very similar, like you said I receive inspection, I do 10% item check, and based on that I accept the lot. If you're still finding the rejected pieces, you're receiving inspection, then you increase to 50% or you go to the 100%. So whether it is advisable to start with 100% may not be, because then too many resources are required. So I hope I'm able to answer your question. In short, you can start with the moderate level. Each process, what type of risk is involved. I would like to show you other thing. ABMS talks about areas where basically the interface with outsiders are involved. You will not find that production process will have a bribery risk, other than you say we talked about incentive and other things. Beyond that, it is not, because they are not interacting with outsiders. They are not interacting. So what the people who are interacting with outsiders, for example, the legal department, the administrative department, who are getting various approvals from outside, agency approval. You have a sales and marketing process. You have a HR process. You have purchase process, or you have any other process which is interacting with outsiders. And the finance process, because everything comes back to the finance and the top management, because top management is ultimately responsible for all it. These processes you'll find mainly bribery risk. Quality process, you have, yes, if you feel bribery is possible, you consider a receiving inspection bribery aspect. Production process may not be possible. So that's how here the focus is more on the commercial functions than on the mainly technical function. R&D, is it possible? If possible, you have to see what is how bribery is possible in or corruption is possible in the R&D. So I'm not sure about that. So it cannot be generalized. If you maybe if you know exactly whatever industry you are in, we can give more specific input. The standard does not talk about any specific thing. It says that with the respective processes, whatever bribery risk is there, you as a team you identify and you build the control to so that those risks does not impact the organization.
Okay. So last 3 minutes left. So I'll take only 2 questions now. So are you conducting any IRCA or other lead auditor course on ABMS? And one more question is, how many companies in India are certified for ISO 37001?
See, as per the ISO data published, I think there are 7 or 8 companies certified in India. We are not conducting any IRCA courses. Not only we, but TQS does not conduct any of the lead auditor programs in India. But it is not a question of lead auditor program only. It is a question of after lead auditor program, what you will do. You have to get accredited get associated with a CV which is accredited. Otherwise, lead auditor courses are required for a company to become a lead auditor with a certification body. That's it. As a company, if you want to implement it, you need only internal auditor qualification for doing the internal audit. For that, you can get trained. We do conduct internal auditor program. We do not conduct a lead auditor program, in short.
Okay. Yes. So we are done with the questions. So remaining questions we will answer through email. So thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. There are a lot of information, like a lot of suspense in this standard, because I just before we close, I want to share a couple of things. Couple of companies which we have certified. They say that we have agent. We thought we will not be certified. One company says we deduct a TDS before we pay money to agent, and who ultimately pays for the clearances. So it is not that the standard allows you to a certain extent. Only thing is you have to define how you manage these processes. There has to be defined controls on this, and it is possible. So if you have any specific questions, specific challenges, please contact us. We will be able to probably provide you very specific input on that. But as it looks, apparently it is not as tricky. You have to start from somewhere as a system. In a typical ISO company, it takes generally 3 years to get mature system, or sometimes it takes 2 cycles to get mature system. Same way, ABMS also, when you implement, you will implement with the understanding the type of corruption you can think of, your team can think of covering those aspects. If you find a new way of people using to enter into wrong practices, then you will build additional controls. So it does not mean that from the very first day you will be perfect. But you have to start from somewhere. As a part of improvement, you keep on improving your system so that it prevents such incident in your company. So thank you very much once again. In case of any further query, you can please write to us, and we'll be happy to support you in your journey of this ABMS implementation. Thank you.